Anushka Thakur. I am Masters in Oral Medicine and Radiology and a proud faculty member of Odont Academy of Learning. I'll be talking about the principles of radiographic interpretation today and we'll be covering these set of topics. Now, why principles of radiographic interpretation is important is because it gives us a step-by-step procedure to reach an accurate diagnosis, okay, and eliminate the possibilities which are present on the during the procedure of interpreting a radiograph. Another thing that is important is before we take the radiograph, we must never do the biopsy because first of all, it helps taking a radiograph and then doing the biopsy will give us an accurate site for the biopsy. And second of all, doing biopsy because of the incision and suturing, it can alter the tissue and thereby alter the radiographic quality or the characteristics, and so we will not be able to interpret the radiograph properly. Now, before we start into interpreting, we need to have an ideal radiograph to reach a proper conclusion. When we say ideal radiograph, we have certain characteristics in mind. First of all, being the density of the radiograph. Density of the radiograph is nothing but how dark or how light an image is, as you can see in the figure here. Second is the contrast. That means you are differentiating or comparing the density of a dark image to a lighter area. Third, we have the sharpness of a radiograph. Sharpness is nothing but you have differing radio densities in the image. How can you differentiate between those radio densities? In this case, we can see you have a restoration, you have dentine here, we have the pulp here. Okay, we as in the pulpal canals here. How easily can we differentiate will tell us the sharpness of a radiograph. And finally, we have the resolution of a radiograph, which says that you should be able to differentiate two areas which have very similar radio densities and are placed close to each other. In this case, you can appreciate the restoration here and a slightly lower radio density of the base of the restoration. Now, with the ideal characteristic of a radiograph, we need to have appropriate viewing conditions. What are they? First is the ambient light which is falling on the radiograph or which you in the room basically should be slightly reduced. The whole focus should be on the radiograph and the holder on which it is mounted should have high intensity light so that you can image or you can basically see or view the darker areas of the image. And then finally, we must have a magnifying glass to see the areas in details. Now, the principles of radiographic interpretations are you have to know the location of the abnormality, the periphery and the shape. Periphery is nothing but the margins or the borders, and what shape that figure forms is a different entity. That is, the periphery is different and shape of a abnormality is different. Then comes the internal structure. That means what it comprises of in the radiograph, how it looks, how the pathology looks internally, and finally how it looks, how it appears externally. That is the surrounding structure. Keeping all these 4 points in mind, we formulate the report of the radiograph and finally come to a diagnosis. First, we come to the location. That is nothing but the anatomical position or the epicenter of the pathology. In case the epicenter is coronal to the tooth, in case of this figure seen here, we will call it odontogenic. Or if it is apical to the tooth but above the inferior alveolar nerve canal, we will again call the lesion odontogenic. If it is in the maxillary antrum, then we will call the lesion non-odontogenic. If it is in the condylar region, because of its nature, we will call it cartilaginous in origin. And if it is within the inferior alveolar nerve canal, we will call it vascular or neural origin. Now, once we have come to the conclusion of the anatomical position, we will now check whether the area or the pathology is localized or generalized. Usually we'll call it generalized when an endocrinal abnormality is involved or disorder, and localized is only when it is present in one particular area, as the name suggests. Next, it comes to whether it is unilateral or bilateral. Unilateral, again, very self-explanatory if it is only present on one side, or bilateral if it is present on both sides. Now, this is important because usually anatomical variations are bilateral in origin, whereas the pathology is usually unilateral. Then it comes to whether the lesion is single or multifocal. Single as in case of a cysts. In case of your long-standing cysts or your tumor, there is some sort of bone which is trapped, or there is a periosteal reaction, or your trabeculae gets trapped. So it gives a multilocular or multifocal appearance. And last, we come to the size of the lesion. Usually, if it is less than 1.5 centimeter, it is considered as a periapical granuloma if it is apical to the tooth structure. If it is greater than 1.5 centimeter, we call it a cyst. And if it is less or more than 1.5 centimeter, irrespective of the fact, if it is ill-defined or not very clear, we would call it an abscess. This is all if it is apical to the tooth or the root of the tooth. Now, next we come to the periphery and the shape. Periphery, like I said before, is the margin, okay, or the boundary. Now, periphery can be of two types, whether it is well-defined or ill-defined. In case it is well-defined, the basic thing is we should be able to delineate or draw the boundary of the lesion. Now, the boundary can be corticated margin or a sclerotic margin. The difference between the two is in corticated margin, it is uniform. The thickness is uniform. Okay. Whereas in sclerotic margin, it is non-uniform thickness. That means it is thin on one side and can be thick on the other, which just means to say that there is a osteogenic reaction which is happening on the thicker side than on the thinner side. Then after well-defined, we have it can be ill-defined. Ill-defined is we will not be able to differentiate or delineate. It is only because of the blending of the normal bone with the abnormal. Okay, usually we call this a moth-eaten type of appearance. Now, when we come to the shape, it can be of different shape. It can either be circular or ovoid. It can be scalloped in case of OKC. It can be irregular. It can be heart shaped if it is a normal variant, or it can be your well defined oval shaped or your eggshell expansion. Then we come to the internal structure of the pathology. Internal structure, it can be completely radiolucent in cases of cysts and granuloma. It can be completely radio-opaque like in osteoma, or a mixed lesion. That means mix of radiolucent and a radio opacity. Now, why do we see mixed internal structure? It can either be because of the trabeculae bone. We know that the trabeculae pattern differs. In case of maxillary anterior, it is more fine and larger when it comes to the marrow space, slightly spread out when it comes to the maxillary posterior region. Then when we see the mandibular anterior region, it becomes slightly coarse and it is spread out, or also called as step ladder like appearance when we come to the mandibular posterior region. So this can be one of the reason why the lesion in these areas appear mixed. Okay. Secondly, there can be residual trapped bone, that is the septas get trapped between the lesion, and so it gives a multifocal appearance. In case of long standing cysts, there will be calcification, or even in the soft tissue it can result in calcification, which gives appearance of a mixed internal structure. Sometimes when the lymph nodes are involved, they become cauliflower-like masses of radio opacity. So it appears as mixed lesion. In case of cysts, sometimes it has absolutely no appearance. There's no recognizable pattern in case of long-standing cysts. And sometimes when the cementum is involved, it becomes slightly homogeneous and dense, again giving a mixed appearance. So in this case, there is, as you can see here, there is an orange peel appearance of the trabeculae. Okay, now this is usually seen in your fibrous dysplasia. Then in this case, you have the septas which are arranged perpendicular to each other, giving a tennis racket-like appearance, which is usually seen in odontogenic myxoma. Then you have your soap bubble appearance. It appears as small bubbles or locules, which are usually seen in your giant cell granuloma. You have your moth-eaten appearance or very irregular appearance, which is usually seen in your squamous cell carcinoma. Then we have cotton wool appearance, as though there are cottons which are disintegrated into different areas. This is usually seen in your cemental osseous dysplasia. Then you have characteristic CEOT, that is, you have your snow-driven appearance, or basically your tire tracks, which are seen in calcifying epithelial odontogenic tumor. And these are the punched out lesions, which is also seen in the skull and in the mandibular region, usually seen in your multiple myeloma. And hair on end appearance, wherein there is spikes of your trabeculae pattern, they, because the dipoles enlarge and you have your trabeculae extending perpendicularly. Even in this case, you can appreciate this is usually your sunburst appearance seen in osteosarcoma. So I have put everything here in a tabular format for your ease. Next we come to the, so now we have finished with the internal structure. Now what effect does this pathology have on the surrounding structure? Usually the surrounding structure is nothing but your teeth, your lamina dura, your PDL space and the root. Okay, so the tooth in general is either displaced superiorly or inferiorly or laterally. When it comes to the root, there is usually resorption seen, okay, in most of the cases. Sometimes when there is no resorption and but the tooth may be displaced superiorly or laterally, the lamina dura gets broken. Okay, there is discontinuity of the lamina dura and the PDL spaces usually enlarge. Okay, in this case. Now, sometimes what happens is usually physiological. You have just your widening of the PDL space, okay, but your bone density differs. So this is usually called Garrington's sign, okay. And then you have effect on your surrounding bone, wherein the pathology can cause a sclerotic or a corticated margin. Inferior alveolar nerve canal can be superiorly placed or inferiorly pushed down. The characteristic sign of fibrous dysplasia is that the inferior alveolar nerve canal is superiorly displaced, whereas in case of your long-standing cysts and tumors, it is inferiorly pushed down. And then you have your peripheral bone reactions. That is your cortical bone. Now, onion peel appearance usually seen in Ewig's sarcoma. It has your periosteum, your subperiosteum is imparting or it has a lot of osteogenic potential, so it imparts the lamellae or the bone, okay, in the form of layers. So this is called as an onion peel appearance. This is usually seen in your occlusal radiograph. It can be appreciated. Next, another form of periosteal reaction is Codman's triangle. Now, Codman's triangle, what happens is you have your subperiosteal layers which is formed, but what happens is from the apex, it gets breached. So it appears as though the periosteal layer is lifted, forming a triangle. This is seen in osteosarcoma. So now this is the reaction of your cortical plate or the cortical bone and the periosteum bone. Now in the first case, you can see the there is no cortication seen here. It is broken. Okay. And there is no periosteal formation. There's no reaction. In the second picture, the cortical plate is broken. Okay. But there is your periosteal bone reaction in the form of lamellae or lines, which gives appearance of your onion peel appearance. Third picture, you can see that it is slightly lifted up, forming a triangle here. Okay, so this is called your Codman's triangle. And finally, you have your periosteal reaction in the form of rays on 90-degree. It is spiking up. So this is called your sunburst or sun ray appearance, usually seen in osteosarcoma. So these are basically some of the characteristic signs of certain lesions and conditions. Now, once we have addressed all these issues, that is, we have the pathology, whether it is where is the position, okay, whether it is unilateral or bilateral, whether it is generalized or localized. Then when we come to the periphery and the shape, whether it is well defined, ill defined, corticated, or sclerotic margin, and then whether the shape, we describe the shape, whether it is round, irregular, oval, whether the internal structure of the lesion is completely radiolucent, radio opaque, or mixed, and finally we describe the surrounding structure. When we come to all of that, now we have to formulate a report, keeping all those 4 points in our mind. Now it can be a normal condition, okay, a normal variation or abnormal, whether this condition is developmental or whether it is acquired recently. Then on basis of this, we classify it. Now the mnemonic for this is, you can remember it in an easier way. Tamil Nadu is also called Chennai and Bombay is also called Mumbai. So you have T, which is for trauma. It can be trauma origin. N is for neoplasia, whether it is benign or malignant neoplasia. C is whether it is a cyst. B is if there is a bone abnormality. M is if it is metabolic in origin. And I is inflammatory in origin. Now, once you have all of these points and your principles of the interpretation, you formulate the ways to proceed. That is, you come to a diagnosis and you accordingly plan the treatment, how to go about it, or the further investigations if required. Now when we have all of this, how do we write the radiographic report, which is the most important step? First is we write the patient's information, basically the demographic data. Then we write the procedure, whether we have taken an IOPAR or a extraoral, or if it is IOPR, whether it is a bite wing procedure and an occlusal procedure. Okay, the clinical importance is an optional point wherein you write only the clinical findings if the clinician has presented it to you. Then you write the radiographic findings based on the 4 points of location, the periphery and shape, the internal structure and the surrounding structure. And finally, when you have all of these points written, how will you come to the diagnosis? Basically, we never write the final radiographic impression. We usually write 2 or 3 differential diagnosis and then compare it with the clinical findings or do other lab investigations or chairside investigations if required, and then formulate the final diagnosis of the condition. That's about it. I hope you found my session helpful. Thank you so much.